is Marty Melville. I am a registered nurse. I want to talk with you about strategies you can use as a nurse to approach diverse populations relevant to culture and care. This can be challenging to nurses because culture is personal to your patient and always changing. Therefore, as nurses, we need to up our game and stay abreast of the various practices, beliefs, and expectations of our patients related to their culture. Why is this important? According to an article updated in 2021 for the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, quote, cultural competence is necessary because it helps the nurse offer the best services to every patient, leading to high satisfaction and care on the side of the patient. Without cultural competence, the health sector will suffer a great loss and ultimately limit the services that it can offer, close quote. In other words, competent care and excellence as a nurse can only be met when you as a nurse understands culture, yours and how it plays into the care you provide, as well as the patient's culture and how it factors into your patient's ability to receive care. Oftentimes, this includes family. Let me give an example of a situation that happened to me while working in the hospital. I mishandled a situation that occurred with a very elderly patient because of my culture and prejudgment that came as a result. This woman arrived in the early evening with her family, and there were a lot of them. Her condition suggested she was indeed very ill, but the family requested no interventions. She was DNR. We agreed to do all we could to keep their loved one comfortable and set about doing just that. After about 30 minutes, the family left. By morning, the family still had not returned and no contact was made by them. My immediate reaction was one of abandonment. I was upset by this and initially thought it best to contact Adult Protective Services. Fortunately, one of my very wise coworkers recognized that the patient was of Native American descent. He explained to me that this is an act of love and very common for this particular tribe to release their loved one's spirit from the body when it is close to death by placing the loved one, while still alive, in a location far away from the Hogan. He said that it is common to see elderly people sitting under a tree waiting to die on a reservation. Doing so allows the spirit to enter their culture's equivalent of heaven. Once I understood that the family had acted in a loving manner and was shown respect to their elderly matron according to the tradition of their culture, I was able to approach the family without judgment. Our conversation was pleasant, supportive, and allowed me to care for that family as well as the patient. In follow-up, the patient was admitted to a floor, and I never knew the outcome, whether she actually died that night or not. But I know the situation could have gone awry had I not been quickly educated about the patient's culture and traditions. Hopefully, this story demonstrates an example of how patient care can be either supportive or lax, depending upon the nurse's recognition and understanding of the patient's culture. As you care for your patients, learn to recognize the signals your patients or their family members will give to alert you to cultural, religious, or ethnic traditions that they embrace. Learn to observe and listen as your patient speaks with you. Notice, does your patient make eye contact? Does your patient defer to an elder or request a recognized leader to be present in decisions made with them? Are there signs of alternative medicine practice prior to or during your involvement with your patient? Do these practices interfere with your care as a nurse? If so, what can you do to provide appropriate care while honoring those practices and traditions that cause no harm or interference? These questions can be applied to nursing models to direct you toward the appropriate plan of care and best approach for your patient. The Purnell model of cultural competence is a great example of how and where to apply your observations to determine cultural influence on your patient. I've provided a link to view more information about Purnell's model at the end of this video discussion. Using different strategies to assess your patient, then applying your findings to a model such as the Purnell's model will give you better insight as to how to care for your patient. Not doing so can lead to problems and misunderstandings fueled by preconceived ideas based on your own culture or beliefs, or through a lack of recognition of the patient's. Let me give you another example of something that happened to me while working in the ER. A non-urgent Asian descent patient came in complaining of symptoms that were mild but bothersome. A quick head-to-toe assessment revealed rails for breath sounds bilaterally. But my initial concern wasn't focused on her breath sounds, rather on strange markings that ran up and down her back. These marks were red, raised, symmetrically rounded at about 5 centimeters in diameter, but they did not appear to be linked to her chief complaint. I was immediately concerned this patient was being abused and asked her about the markings on her back. She very casually stated, "Oh, that's cupping my aunt did before I came in here." I was not familiar with cupping, and as the patient was not in distress as a result of the practice, I was able to focus back on her chief complaint. Soon after, I asked the physician about the custom of cupping and mentioned her back to him. Thankfully, this physician was aware of the practice and explained that this is a tradition practiced in many cultures using heated cups to create suction on the skin to draw out impurities. He stated that while it looked bad, it was harmless. This relieved my initial concern, and we were able to successfully treat the patient and discharge her without incident while supporting her cultural belief and tradition of cupping. Strategies such as assessment by inspection and conversation with the patient enlightens the nurse to a cultural custom that may be part of the patient's lifestyle. In addition, education and maintaining the motivation to understand more about cultural practices you may not be familiar with is important. Showing empathy and seeking to understand through language barriers, including conversing using terminology that the patient understands, breaks down hurdles that might impede quality care. Learning how to approach a patient without judgment is one of the takeaways that I have from my practice in nursing. Let me tell you one more story that was handled well by me and the ER staff assigned to the patient that day. This individual had come in with complaints of bleeding and required a specific exam to determine the cause. The patient spoke little English and was very upset, even frightened. The assigned doctor spoke this patient's language fluently and was able to determine that the patient did not want the companion who was waiting outside to know about the findings. As we began the examination, it was determined this patient's concern was personal, distinctive, and more significant than was previously assumed. The panic expressed by this patient was related to the findings, and the very crucial need was for privacy required for this patient and from the ER staff, and that prevailed. My heart broke for this patient as tears spilled and an explanation of the difficulties this patient dealt with daily followed. I'm happy to report we were able to provide dignified care and emotional support to this patient. Privacy was never violated, and the language barrier was not a hindrance, allowing the patient to open up to a very personal concern. The end result was loving, supportive, and respectful of this patient's cultural situation. The value of non-judgmental approaches allow us to remain open-minded to what may actually be happening with the patient and provides the opportunity to support that patient in a way that is meaningful and purposeful for that person. Now, take a moment to write down all of the different cultural experiences you have had through your nursing career thus far, at least as many as you can remember. We'll pause for just a few moments to allow you to do this. Now, take a look at your list thus far. Note what you have done well in each situation and think about what you may have done differently. Keeping a cultural journal is a great way for you to reference quickly cultural traditions observed in your locality. This will be a valuable go-to resource when you need to refresh your memory about cultural competency in your practice. I commend each of you for your diligence in seeking to become better prepared for cultural diversity as you care for your patients. It is my hope that we can continue to do so going forward as nurses. Thank you.